Snow covered every path in Europe's coldest season. You feel the hunger in your own ribs as if you stood in that winter village yourself. Bread from snow sounds like a lie told by a desperate mother, but families tried it. Boiled flakes, dried roots, ground bark, anything to stretch the last handful of flour. You picture a child staring at an empty table while neighbors dig through frozen earth for lost grain jars. Your fingers ache as if holding a shovel in ice wind. This story is not distant. You feel the breath of these families on your neck, whispering their quiet hope through frostbitten nights. They survived on crumbs. You might have too. A family in a small village near the Carpathian Mountains walked through December nights with thin coats and silent steps. Their father guarded a weak fire. Their mother saved scraps of rye under a loose floorboard. No visitor traveled the frozen road since early autumn. Wolves waited near the tree line. Smoke rose from chimneys only when someone burned furniture to stay warm. During these months, meals turned into experiments. Snow mixed with dried berries. Pine bark ground into coarse powder. Frozen potatoes chipped from soil as hard as iron. The family whispered prayers over a pot that barely steamed. Winter pressed on walls made from stone and moss. They never knew if dawn brought relief or more loss. You are here with me on a long winter night. Tell me where you are listening from and what the clock says right now. Settle your shoulders. Slow your breathing. Pull a blanket up to your chin. Let your hands rest. If this story soothes you, tap the heart or subscribe so you return when the fire grows low again. Leave a quiet comment so I know you are safe. The first storm reached the village before dawn. Snow pressed against shutters. Wind moved through gaps in stone walls like thin knives against bare skin. The father woke first. He listened to the barn roof strain under new weight. His breath drifted in white clouds inside the room. No fire burned. They saved wood for nights when hunger mixed with fear. He slipped from wool blankets and stepped across cold floorboards that creaked louder than they did in summer. He checked the pot from yesterday. A thin smear of starch clung to the sides. He scraped it with his thumb and placed his finger on his tongue. He tasted nothing. The family once stored sacks of rye under thick layers of hay, but autumn frost arrived early. Fields turned to brittle stalks before harvest. Others in the village lost livestock. One neighbor buried 2 goats beside the frozen creek. Another broke into an abandoned chapel searching for grain once stored there during wars. Only dust remained. He pulled his coat around his shoulders. No fur on the edges, only stretched linen. He stepped outside. The wind swallowed his footsteps. Snow reached his shins. He walked toward the barn where a leather bucket hung beside a cracked wheel. The bucket held ice. He broke pieces with a dull knife and filled a clay jug. Their mother planned to melt snow for soup water. They always searched for clean piles far from soot blown from chimneys. Snow gathered beneath pine branches worked best. He scooped handfuls with numb fingers. Each handful felt like lifting stones. When he returned, the children stirred under blankets. They shared 2 wool sheets and a coat with missing buttons. Their mother pressed her palm against the youngest child's forehead. Fever made cheeks red. Winter illness spread quick. Every cough echoed in the small house. They once boiled herbs to ease sickness, but most herbs shriveled during early frost. She dipped cloths in cold water from melted snow and placed it on the child's brow. The boy shivered, teeth chattering. Outside, a church bell rang once. The priest signaled news. No long peals, Only one. It meant travelers arrived, rare in deep winter. The father stepped out again. Snow reached his knees near the gate. A small group approached from the east road. 3 figures wrapped in cloaks, their boots heavy with frost. One led a mule thin enough to show ribs through patchy fur. The travelers moved slow, heads low, pushing through powder that hid frozen ruts beneath. Neighbors opened their doors, but nobody rushed. Winter visitors often meant hunger shared between more mouths. Still, they gathered. The priest greeted them with raised hand. The leader of the group removed his hood. A grey beard stuck to his face with ice. His voice cracked. Supplies lost near mountain pass. Sacks torn during a slide. Only a few roots left. No bread since midweek. They searched for shelter, help, a place to rest. The village had little to spare. Still, the priest nodded. They guided the group toward abandoned granary built generations earlier. Thick stone walls, roof sagging but stable. The father approached the travelers. He offered to bring warm water. The leader thanked him with a weak smile. His lips looked split. He held the mule's rope with trembling fingers. Inside their cottage, the mother poured snow from the jug into a pot. She lit a small flame with dried twigs stored near the hearth. Twigs burned quickly. She rationed each handful. As the water warmed, she added bark strips shaved from a fallen pine branch. Bark tasted bitter but held fiber. She sprinkled ground berries saved from autumn. The mix made a thin broth with a faint color. She stirred slowly so no piece stuck to the bottom and burned. Steam rose. She handed the father a cup to carry to the travelers. The cup felt fragile. A crack ran across its surface. He held it steady. Outside, the wind eased for a moment. He reached the granary. The group huddled near a corner where stones blocked draughts. He offered the cup to the bearded man. The traveler sipped with closed eyes. He whispered a quiet blessing. Others watched with longing, waiting their turn. The father returned home. His daughter asked if the travelers carried flour. He shook his head. She lowered her gaze to the floor. Their mother handed her a small crust saved from early winter, dry and hard. The girl softened it by holding it near steam. She took tiny bites, careful not to finish too fast. Later, the father prepared to leave again. He intended to search the old mill near the riverbank. Some believed a jar of grain remained beneath collapsed beams since a raid many winters before. Nobody dug there since early snow arrived. He wrapped cloth around his feet inside boots to stop frostbite. He tied rope around his waist to pull a small sled in case he found anything worth carrying. His wife watched him. Her eyes stayed calm. She placed her hand on his arm. No words needed. He nodded and stepped into the wind. The path to the river stretched across open fields. Snow-covered fences and old markers. Only the tops of posts peeked through in some places. He walked slowly, pushing each foot forward until he reached the edge of the woods. Trees blocked some wind. Branches shook under the weight of snow. Some snapped and dropped heavy loads on the ground. He reached the mill by midday. The sun sat low, though hours remained until dusk. The mill wheel lay frozen in thick ice. Moss-covered stones, now hidden beneath frost. He approached the opening in a warped wall. He ducked inside. Darkness greeted him. He struck flint to create a small spark, then used a scrap of cloth soaked in tallow to produce low flame. Shadows danced over beams. He searched corners, broken sacks, shredded cloth, scattered husks like old shells, nothing fresh. He tapped the floorboards with a stick. One board echoed hollow. He knelt and pried it up. Beneath lay a jar with a cracked lid. His pulse quickened. He removed the lid. Inside, a handful of wheat kernels clung together with dust. Enough for one loaf, if stretched with bark powder. Enough for hope. He placed kernels in a cloth pouch and tucked the pouch under coat. On his walk home, snow deepened. Wind picked up again. He leaned forward, pushing through drifts. His rope dragged an empty sled behind him. He passed the boundary tree marking a safe road. Beyond the tree line, wolves roamed. He heard a distant howl. He moved faster by the time he reached the house. Dusk painted sky dull blue. The door opened before he knocked. His wife pulled him inside. Children gathered around him. He removed the pouch and revealed the seeds. Their daughter gasped. The mother pressed her hand to her chest. She nodded once. No cheer. They saved energy. Joy is wasteful in the long winter. They placed kernels in a bowl and spread them near the fire to dry. Later, they planned to grind them with a small stone tool inherited from grandfather. They often mixed flour with pine bark powder. It stretched dough into flat cakes placed on an iron plate over embers. The taste felt coarse, but filled my stomach for a short while. Night settled heavily. The travelers in the granary slept under threadbare blankets offered by neighbors. The priest walked from house to house, checking for illness. He carried small vial of oil from old stores. He shared drops with those suffering worst chills. Oil smelled faintly of herbs, long stored in dark cellar. Inside the family's cottage, mother stirred new broth. She poured small bowl for each child. Steam fogged their faces. They slurped slow. The youngest boy's fever eased slightly. His breath steadier. He drifted to sleep. Others folded bedding closer to hearth. Wind outside lifted loose shingles. Snow slipped through cracks and landed in small piles near door. The father sealed gaps with cloth strips. Later, when everyone slept, the mother remained awake. She held the dried kernels in her hands. She whispered over them. Her voice quiet, steady. She prayed not for abundance, but for one more morning with children alive and warm enough to rise. The storm continued through night. Wolves circled outskirts of village. They followed scent of mule near granary. The beast stamped ground and snorted. The bearded traveller woke and stood guard with wooden staff. He whispered songs from his homeland to calm mule. His voice rasped with exhaustion. Near dawn, wind slowed. Stars faded. Smoke drifted from a few chimneys. The father rose again. He peeked outside. Snow reached new height against walls. He shoveled path with wide board. His daughter joined him, feet wrapped in wool scraps. They worked silent, every movement slow to conserve strength. The mother set stones beside hearth to heat. She planned to place stones beneath blankets to warm children through morning. Fire burned small, careful. Twigs crackled. She looked at kernels again. She measured half for today, half for next week in case storms returned stronger. A knock came at door, gentle but sharp in cold morning stillness. The father opened. The priest stood with frost in beard, his eyes heavy. He asked if they saw a young woman from neighboring house. She left at dawn to search for lost dog. Snow swallowed her tracks. The father nodded and prepared to help search. His wife placed kernels back in bowl and covered them with rag. She touched his shoulder again before he stepped out. The search stretched across fields. Villagers walked in groups, calling her name. Breath filled air like smoke. Snow reflected pale light from rising sun. Their boots sank deep with each step. The father stopped near old well, hidden under drift. He listened. Faint cry rose from direction of tree line. He motioned others. They hurried. They found young woman kneeling beside her dog. The animal lay still, fur frozen stiff. She clutched it to chest, tears carving lines on her face. They lifted both and guided her back toward village. No words spoken, snow-muffled sound, only crunch of boots, soft sobs, and sighs of wind. Back in cottage, father removed boots and thawed fingers near fire. His daughter wrapped his hands in warm cloth. He looked at kernels once more. Life and loss sat side by side in that small bowl. He ground kernels with slow circles, powder mixed with bark shavings until texture turned rough. He added warm water from pot and shaped small loaf. The dough sat near fire to rise a little. When ready, he placed it on hot plate. The smell reached children's noses. Quiet smiles formed. They waited in patient silence. They shared bread in small pieces. Each bite held warmth through cold morning. They tasted more than food. They tasted chance. Outside, storm clouds gathered again. Dawn faded behind clouds as new snow drifted across rooftops. Smoke from chimneys thinned until it looked like pale ribbons. The family stayed near hearth, while the father mended rope for sled. He worked slow since rope fibers snapped in cold. Each knot tied meant less strain on his hands during next journey. His wife packed bark strips in cloth pouch. She used small twig to stir broth from night before so nothing settled at bottom. Children sat close while stones warmed beneath blankets. Outside, priest walked past houses with lantern held low. Light glowed in faint circle around his boots. He checked granary where travelers slept. The bearded man sat awake, back against wall, mule beside him. He stroked Annel's neck to keep it calm. The priest spoke in hushed tone. They spoke about supplies near passes to the east. The bearded man believed sacks left behind might still sit under snow if wolves had not torn them. The priest listened, eyes narrowed with thought. He planned route for a group of villagers strong enough to search once wind eased. The father heard footsteps at door. He opened to find priest waiting. He explained plan. A small party would leave after noon to search mountain pass. The father agreed to join. He stepped aside to share space near fire with priest. Steam drifted from pot. Priest removed gloves and rubbed hands. He noticed small loaf remnants on table. He smiled thinly. He understood weight of each crumb. News traveled across village. Men and women prepared sleds, axes, and poles to probe snow for hidden drop-offs. One elder sharpened blades used to cut frozen rope. Another sewed patches onto fur hoods. Children watched adults move through village with purpose unseen during long winter stretches before departure. The father visited granary. He offered travelers a share of broth. The bearded man pressed his hands together in thanks. His eyes held gratitude without words. The father noticed frost on edges of blankets. He returned home to fetch extra cloth squares to block wind. His wife insisted he take spare for himself. He declined, pointing toward granary. She understood. By midday, Sky turned flat grey. Party gathered near old chapel. Snow piled high along outer wall. Door creaked as priest stepped inside to collect wooden cross that once hung above altar. He wrapped it in cloth and tied it to his staff. He believed symbols gave direction when roads hid under snow. Some villagers followed him out of trust, others out of memory of last harsh season when many perished. The father tightened rope around waist, attached sled, and joined group. They moved toward East Road. Snow reached higher than knees. Party formed line, each following prints of the one ahead. Trees bowed under weight above them. Branches snapped, sending sudden thumps to ground. Wind pushed snow sideways until horizon blurred. They stopped often to breathe. Frost formed along eyebrows and lashes. Hours passed without sight of mountain pass markers. Party reached frozen stream. They crossed with caution since ice cracked near bends. They avoided open patches where water still flowed. Priest marked each safe step with staff. Father checked sky for sign of evening. Light faded faster under storm cover. Party reached narrow valley. Old footprints lay faint under fresh snow. One villager pointed toward slope. A broken crate lay half buried. They brushed snow aside and found torn cloth tied to wood. It matched sacks travelers described. Hope stirred among group. They dug around area. Shovels struck ice and frozen soil. Nails bent. They used axes to break crust. Under layers, they found scattered grain kernels mixed with dirt. Not enough to feed entire village, but enough to stretch meals for several days. They collected everything in sacks sewn from heavy linen. The father packed small sack on sled. Further upslope, mule tracks sank deep into drift. Party followed path toward cluster of rocks shaped like teeth. Beneath ledge, they found second stash, a crate filled with root vegetables wrapped in straw. Roots looked shriveled, but firm enough to boil. Straw protected them from frostbite during slide. Villagers cheered with low voices. Sound felt strange in quiet valley. They loaded roots on sleds. Priest urged quick return before night closed in. Party formed line again and moved back toward village. Snow fell heavier now. Wind roared through trees. They leaned into storm, heads lowered. Shadows moved between trunks. One villager whispered warning. Wolf prints crossed path ahead. Party tightened formation. Father kept hand near axe. Wolves followed but did not attack. They watched from distance, eyes faint glows in darkness. Party pushed on, reaching frozen stream once more. Ice groaned beneath weight. They crossed fast, avoiding cracks. Trees parted to reveal faint lights from village windows. Relief washed across group. Near entrance, villagers emerged with torches. They helped unload sleds. Sacks carried into chapel where priest took stock. Roots delivered to homes with sick or elderly first. Grain stored in sealed jars to protect from moisture. Work continued deep into night. Children watched from doorways, eyes wide. Father returned home with small share of grain. He removed boots and warmed hands by hearth. His wife placed pot on fire, filled with melting snow. She planned hearty broth with roots from share. Children gathered close. Youngest still pale, but fever lower. Warmth from hearth touched cheeks with gentle glow. Mother washed clay plate used earlier for loaf. She sifted grain with careful fingers, removing dirt. Father ground kernels with stone. He mixed powder with water and bark shavings. He shaped dough into thin rounds so more pieces formed. He placed first round on plate above embers. Aroma filled room. They ate slow. Each bite eased tightness in chests. Tears formed in mother's eyes, though she stayed silent. Father reached across table and held her hand. Children leaned against each other, eyelids heavy. Later, father stepped outside to speak with priest. Torchlight flickered along chapel wall. Priest leaned against stone column. He thanked father for strength in valley. Father nodded, eyes on ground. Priest mentioned plan to rotate guards around granary since wolves circled outer homes. Father agreed to watch first shift before dawn. He returned home, wrapped blanket, and sat near door to rest. Fire dimmed to soft glow. Outside, wind slowed. Snow fell in smaller flakes. Wolves howled in distance, but did not approach. The village slept near midnight. Father stepped outside again. Sky cleared slightly. Stars faint behind thin clouds. He walked toward granary, boots crunching. He climbed a wooden ladder to small lookout above doorway. He sat with staff across knees. Breath formed clouds that drifted slow. He watched forest line for movement. Hours passed. Sleep pulled at his eyes. He rubbed face with cold fingers. Down below, mule shifted weight and snorted quietly. Travelers inside murmured in sleep. The bearded man woke and looked up through crack in roof. He lifted hand. Father lifted his in response. No words needed. Before dawn, clouds parted further. A pale strip of light rose over mountains. Snow sparkled in early glow. Father breathed deep. For first time in days, air carried scent of pine rather than pure frost. Morning promised labor, but also nourishment. When he returned home after shift, house felt warmer. Mother stirred pot thickened with root slices. Children slept soundly. Sunlight filtered through frost-coated window. He sat beside hearth and removed. Gloves. He rubbed hands together, feeling heat seeped into skin. Village stirred with new energy. People walked roads clearing snow from roofs so beams did not collapse. They repaired fences buried under drifts. Priests organized storage of remaining roots in stone cellar beneath chapel. Each household contributed labor to seal cracks with clay and straw. Travelers helped repair granary roof. Mule regained strength slowly with warm mash made from grains. Soaked overnight. Bearded man shared stories by fire about regions farther east where winters stretched longer than here. Children listened with wide eyes, learning there were lands with colder nights and higher winds. Afternoon brought clear sky. Sun hung low but bright enough to cast long shadows across white fields. Some villagers walked a frozen stream 4 blocks of ice. Others cut dead branches for fuel. Father carried sled to edge of woods to gather fallen limbs. He chose branches large enough for several nights. He stacked them beneath lintu beside house as evening arrived. Mother prepared meal for neighbors who lost goatherd. They gathered. A round table with bowls held close to faces. Steam warmed cheeks. They thanked father and mother with quiet voices. Stories passed between families. They spoke of past winters, survived, and how ancestors mixed snow with ground moss to stretch bread during sieges. Wisdom flowed without pride. Night returned with calm wind. Father tucked children under blankets. He placed warm stones near their feet. He sat beside wife and watched embers pulse. Silence held room. Outside, Moonlight reflected off fields, turning world silver. He listened to slow breaths of family. He thanked sky for small mercies. Morning rose slow, pale and thin. Frost coated every surface in sharp crystal lines. The father helped the priest finish inventory inside chapel cellar. They stacked roots in rows on stone shelves, straw tucked between each pile to prevent rot. Grain jars sat close to wall, lids sealed with wax melted over low flame. The cellar air stayed cold but stable, perfect to keep supplies from spoiling. Through long winter, the father lifted final sack with strained breath and set it near stairwell. Work done, outside, villagers gathered for short meeting. The priest spoke about ration schedules so each home received small share at steady pace. No loud objections. Hunger softened tempers since everyone feared shortage. The father listened near back of crowd, arms folded to keep warmth close to chest. His wife stood beside him holding their youngest child wrapped in fur cloak given by a neighbor. Child pressed cheek to her shoulder, half asleep. After meeting, villagers dispersed. Father returned home to repair shutters damaged during storms. He used nails salvaged from broken crate found in valley. Hammer strikes echoed through still air. Snow slid from roof each time he hit wood. Mother swept flakes away from doorway and laid russes on floor to soak melted puddles. Children collected icicles from eaves and placed them in bucket to melt into drinking water. Midday brought light breeze. Snow shifted like powder blown from flour sack. Travelers from granary joined. Villagers in clearing paths to main road. The bearded man leaned on staff while mule carried empty baskets. They worked quiet. Strangers no longer felt foreign. Hunger formed bond faster than words. Father paused to rest near well. He noticed footprints leading beyond old boundary tree toward ridge where few dared walk. He knelt, examined tracks. Smaller than wolf, larger than dog. Toes spread wide like someone wore thin leather soles without thick padding. Tracks moved in uneven line before disappearing under fresh drift. He stood, eyes fixed on ridge. Wind brushed snow against his coat. Mother joined him, eyes following his gaze. She asked if someone left village again. He nodded once. She lowered. Head, pressing lips together. Each departure risked life. Winter punished wanderers. Father planned to check path after chores. He filled bucket from well, hauled water back home, then wrapped cloth around ankles before leaving. He headed toward ridge and slow measured steps. Snow deeper beyond boundary tree. He kept staff ready to test ground. Branches above rattled in wind. Halfway up slope, he saw a faint outline of shelter made from stacked stones and pine branches. Smoke crept from tiny hole atop. Someone hid there. He approached with caution, boots sinking with each step. He reached entrance and called softly. Movement inside stopped. After pause, voice answered in low rasp. Father stepped closer, lifting branch flap. Inside, young man sat near ember pit with thin blanket. He wore a coat too light for winter. His face gaunt, cheeks hollow. Bread crust lay beside him. He looked toward Father with wary eyes. Father asked how he reached ridge. Young man explained he fled nearby hamlet after sickness spread among his group. He feared he carried illness, so he kept distance from others. He survived on dried mushrooms found in hollow log and snow melted in small pot. His strength faded each day. Father studied him, noting tremor in hands and weakness in voice. He told young man village prepared food, share for those in need. Young man hesitated. He feared returning might bring harm if sickness followed him. Father placed hand on young man's shoulder. He sensed fever rising beneath thin coat. He knew leaving him alone meant death. He convinced him to return, but stay separate until priest assessed illness. They walked slow down ridge. Snow swallowed tracks as they moved. Near boundary tree, young man stumbled. Father lifted his arm over shoulder and supported weight. When they reached village edge, Mother saw them and hurried to meet. She guided young man to shed behind house where space waited for storage. They laid blanket over straw and lit lantern to warm air. Father fetched broth and small slice of bread. Priest arrived soon. He checked young man's pulse and eyes. He pressed cloth on forehead soaked in snow water. He listened to breathing. After a while, he nodded. Illness mild. Exhaustion worse than fever. He ordered rest, warmth, and small meals through day. Young man thanked each person with cracked voice. Snow fell again by late afternoon. Thick flakes drifted slow and silent. Father repaired shed doors so no draft reached patient. Mother prepared stew from tiny portion of roots. She added bark powder for thickness. She carried bowl to shed and sat beside young man while he ate. Steam warmed his face. His eyes closed between bites. Children watched through doorway, curious, but quiet. Father motioned them back inside where hearth glowed. They settled beneath blankets. He sat beside Mother and wiped frost from her hair. She leaned against him, shoulders relaxed at last. They listened to wind shift outside shed. Night. Arrive with heavy sky. Snow piled against walls. Father took second shift, guarding granary. He carried lantern across quiet village. Footprints vanished behind him within minutes. At granary, he met elder woman who finished first shift. She nodded and headed home, coat flapping behind her. Father climbed ladder again, staff across knees. Forest dark beyond fields. No wolves visible yet. He rubbed hands to keep them warm. Thoughts drifted to young man in shed. He wondered how many others hid in hills because illness or shame kept them away from village. Winter forced hidden stories into open. Hours passed. Only soft whisper of snow and low creak of granary roof. Father drifted towards sleep before sudden rustle in woods snapped his eyes open. He leaned forward, lantern raised. Silhouette moved. Behind trees, not wolf. Figure stood upright, wrapped in cloak. Figure stepped closer, then stopped when lantern light reached path. Father called out. No answer. Figure turned and disappeared behind thicket. Father climbed down ladder, staff ready, but decided not to follow far. Snow near woods deep. He worried about ambush or thin ice. He returned to post, eyes fixed on tree line. Cloaked figure. Did not return. Wind picked up, blowing drift across open field, covering all sign. Dawn arrived slow. Villagers woke to thick blanket of snow. Paths buried again. Father finished shift and walked home. Mother poured warm water into wooden bowl so he could wash frozen hands. Children wrapped arms around his sides as greeting. He kissed each forehead lightly, then sat by hearth. Young man in shed stirred from sleep. Mother brought oatmeal made from small grain share and pine sap for slight sweetness. She fed him slow spoonfuls while father checked his temperature. Fever lower. Strength returned enough to sit upright without support. He thanked them with soft voice. Priest arrived later with travelers. Bearded man carried bundle of dried herbs. Stored in granary, he shared them with young men. Mule stood outside shed, frost clinging to ears. Priest asked if young man wished blessing. He nodded. Priest spoke simple words while laying hand on his head. By midday, sun returned behind thin clouds. Father left house to help repair roof on neighbor's barn before snow wake collapsed beams. He climbed ladder with hammer at belt. Wood groaned as he moved across rafters. Villagers passed up boards and ropes. They worked long hours, stopping only to wipe snow from eyes and warm fingers under coats. Mother helped neighbor patch quilts torn by mice. She stitched frayed edges with thread unraveled from old tunic. Children carried small buckets of water to animals in pens. Ice cracked at surface each time animals lowered muzzles. Young man asked to help once he regained strength. Priest urged rest but allowed small tasks near shed. He repaired tools with wire and cleaned frozen hinges. Travelers spoke with him, sharing stories of roads they walked. They told him about river crossing. Farther east where bridge collapsed under weight of carts. He listened, nodding slow. Evening fell without storm. Sky tinted pale purple. Smoke from chimneys rose straight into air. Father sat outside and sharpened axe while mother tended fire. Young man approached and thanked him again for rescue. Father listened without pride. He pointed toward ridge and said, survival never belonged to one person. Children gathered around father, asking for a story about ancestors who planted first wheat in region. Father spoke in low tone so night felt calm around them. He described how people carried seeds in pouches tied to belts and traded kernels for metal tools. They passed seeds across borders long before maps existed. Children leaned closer, listening to history with steady breaths. Night deepened. Stars appeared between drifting clouds. Wolves barked from distant ridge but did not approach. Father stood and stretched stiff legs. He walked to shed, checked on young man one last time. He tucked her extra blanket around shoulders, then closed. Door. Inside house. Mother served thin soup for dinner. They ate slow. Each bowl warmed stomach and eased tension. Father thought about cloaked figure again. He mentioned sighting to mother. She frowned slightly. She wondered if someone followed young man or searched for supplies hidden under snow. Father promised to watch path in morning before sleep. He placed small stone at door bottom to block draft. Children curled against each other. Mother blew out lantern. Fire burned low. House settled. Outside, snow fell light and soft. Wind gentle. Village breathed easier for a moment, but winter still held grip. More storms waited beyond mountains. Supplies still thin. Faith and labor kept walls standing. The next morning arrived without color. Sky pale gray. Air crisp enough to sting lungs with each inhale. Father woke before others. He dressed in silence, boots stiff from cold night. He opened door and stepped into fresh snow that reached halfway up his calves. Tracks from previous day gone. Ridge. Woods, granary, all blank under smooth white sheet. He stood still and listened. Trees did not groan. Wind silent. Only distant crack as ice shifted along stream. He turned toward ridge where young man hid days before. No movement, no smoke. He remembered cloaked figure from night guard shift. He walked slow toward boundary tree, staff in hand. Snow deeper outside village road. He paused to test surface with staff before each step. Threads of sunlight pierced clouds and sparkled across landscape. He reached ridge base but stopped. Path climbed steep. Snow drifted high. He traced area where figure vanished. Only smooth slope. He considered climbing but chose caution. He returned to village eyes, scanning each tree. Back home, mother stoked fire and boiled water. She sprinkled tiny pinch of remaining herbs into pot to soothe youngest child's cough. Children sat on floor reshaping warm stones with cloth too. Place at bed later. Young man stepped from shed, moving slow but steady. He bowed head to mother in thanks before sitting near doorway to repair broken metal clasp for harness. Father told mother about morning walk. She listened without fear or surprise. Hard winters brought strangers, deserters, old wanderers haunted by memory. Some sought refuge, some sought food. Some watched from shadows, waiting for weakness. They agreed to keep door barred each night and take turns watching fields. Travelers at granary planned to leave soon. The bearded man met father to repay kindness. He offered leather strap cut from saddle. Father accepted says leather, tough to find in winter. They stood near granary doorway while mule chewed bundle of straw. The bearded man described another route east with fewer wolves but deeper snow. Father pictured path in mind, considering if journey worth taking once supplies low again. Later morning, priest gathered villagers for discussion beside chapel. He explained need to send scouting pair toward market town 2 days walk south. Town might hold merchants stranded by storms with goods to trade. Village risked long-term hunger if storms returned stronger. Many nodded, though worry-filled faces. Father offered to join, but pre-selected younger men quick on snowshoes. Father stayed to defend village if needed. Villagers spent afternoon assembling offering for trade. Small bundles of dried bark strips, woven cloth patches, metal tools repaired during long nights. They packed everything in sled. Scouts prepared snowshoes made from bent willow branches, tied with sinew. Father tested knots before departure. When scouts left, villagers stood silent. They watched figures shrink into distance until only tiny shapes moved along horizon. Mother clasped hands before chest. She whispered short prayer. Father placed hand on her back. They walked home together. Inside cottage, steamed from pot-filled air. Children warmed fingers over hearth. Mother scraped bottom for bits of root stuck. Earlier, she served bowls. Yankees coughed less. Young man ate outside to avoid spreading any illness, though priest said fever gone. He wrapped blanket around shoulders and breathed warm, broth slow. Evening approached early. Shadows long across fields. Father returned to ridge with young men to gather pine branches. They piled branches on sled. They worked without words. Young man pointed toward distant cluster of trees shaped like arch. He said group once camped. Their last moon cycle. Father asked if campsites held anything worth searching. Young man shrugged weakly. Only broken crates and torn blankets left. They loaded final pile and pulled sled back home. Mother spread branches near hearth to dry. Later she would break them into kindling. Children arranged smallest branches beside pot for quick boiling. Water when illness returned. Night rolled over village. Fires glowed through cracked shutters. Father sat outside to clean blade of axe. Snowflakes drifted slow. Young men joined him. They watched Trillion for movement. Hours passed without sound. Before dawn, they returned inside to rest. Next morning, wind howled again. Storm grew thick. Snow swirled in circles outside window. Roof beams creaked. Father sat by wall and repaired leather strap with needle of bone. Mother ground final portion of grain from last valley haul. She planned thin porridge for breakfast. Young man offered to fetch snow for melting. Father refused since storm fierce. They remained inside until wind eased by midday. Storm settled. Snow piled higher than fence posts. Father shoveled path from door to shed. While shoveling, he heard faint crunch beyond boundary tree. He paused. Wind quiet. Crunch came again. He lifted staff. Snow shifted near woods, then stopped. Mother stepped out and called for him to come inside. He nodded but continued watching. Trailing few moments longer. Later that day, old widow from far end of village visited. Her roof leaked after storm. Father and young man followed her back home to repair. Her house smaller and colder. She kept fire weak due to little wood. Walls made from thin boards lined with dried moss. They patched roof with flat stones and branches. They stuffed gaps with straw. Widow held their hands and thanked them. She handed them small pouch with dried berries. Mother later mixed berries into evening broth. As daylight faded, scouts had not returned. Priest grew uneasy. He walked village checking doors and windows. People gathered near chapel to discuss plan if scouts lost. Father volunteered to search next morning, but priest insisted wait until storm fully passed. Risk high if night travel. Attempted night deep. Snow reflected moonlight. Father could not sleep. He stood by window listening. He stepped outside quietly while family slept. Air sharp and cold. He walked to boundary tree. He saw a trail of faint impressions leading toward. Woods, narrow, close together. Human steps, fresh. He knelt and brushed snow aside. Tracks pointed away from village, not toward. He followed short distance, then stopped when trees closed tight. Beyond branches, he saw movement. Cloaked figure again. Stood watching him. Face hidden in shadow. Father lifted staff and called out. Figure stepped back and disappeared without sound. Father stood alone. He felt chill deeper than cold. He returned home and locked door. Morning brought purple sky. Priests organized search for scouts. Father joined despite long night. They followed southern path. Wind calm. Snow deep over old road. They walked slow, staff testing ground. Hours passed. Near small ravine, they found broken snowshoe ripped by stone. Tracks scattered around area. Scout slipped into ravine but climbed out. Blood on snow, small drops. Group searched further. They found first scout near roots of fallen tree. He sat hunched, alive but weak. Leg injured? They lifted him onto sled. He said, second scout continued ahead to town. He lost trail when storm hit. Father and two others continued search while others returned. Injured scout to village. They followed new set of tracks down valley. Tracks led to frozen pond. On far side, they found second scout collapsed under pine tree. He breathed slow but conscious. He did not reach town. Storm forced him back. Father gave him water from melted snow. They placed him on sled beside first sled. They traveled back before night reached. Village received them with relief. Scouts treated with broth and warmed stones. Priests thanked father and others. Snow continued falling, but lighter. Mother hugged father long when he returned. Children pressed faces against his coat. That night, father sat by fire thinking about cloaked figure. He wondered if stranger watched scouts or village. He planned watch rotation more strict. He sharpened axe for morning tasks. Across village, travelers prepared to depart soon. Bearded man gifted father leather gloves stitched from scraps. Father accepted, grateful since cold worsened his joints. Mule brayed low as though sensing road ahead. Young man from ridge grew stronger. He helped haul buckets from well and split small logs. Children laughed with him as he told broken stories of his former group around fire. He smiled, weak but real. Night calm. Snow sparkled under moon. Father stepped outside once more. He listened to silent woods. No figure appeared. Only distant howl from wolves. Winter continued its long hold, but warmth inside cottage grew steadier. By morning the village breathed slower. Fires burned steady behind shutters. The storm left snowpack high enough to bury fences and swallow wheels of abandoned carts. Father stepped outside, boots sinking to mid-calf. He moved careful to avoid slipping on ice beneath loose powder. The sky hovered pale blue, no wind yet, but clouds weighted over ridge like heavy blankets. Ready to fall again, Mother handed him small cloth parcel with 2 flat cakes made from leftover grain and bark. He tucked them inside, coat then fastened. Leather gloves gifted by the bearded man. They fit snug and warm. He nodded to Mother before walking toward chapel where priests prepared daily tasks. Priest stood outside cellar door counting jars. He wiped frost from lids, then dipped his head toward Father. Supplies low but steady. If storms held back for a few days, they might stretch rations until scouts healed enough to return south. Father listened while stacking wood near chapel steps. His breath drifted long and thin in cold air. Young man approached carrying bundle of branches. He set them near chapel and thanked priest for iapses. Priest placed hand on his shoulder. He asked if young man remembered names of villages beyond ridge where sickness spread. He recited list, voice thin. Priest noted each name, then folded cloth. Map and hid it inside cloak. Travelers finished packing belongings at granary. Bearded man tightened straps on mule's saddle. He approached Father and bowed head. He said they would try to reach Eastern Pass before next storm. Father placed loath crust in his hand. Bearded man paused, eyes wet, then tied crust a pouch on saddle. They walked to village edge, chased by quiet blessings from those who watched. Snow swallowed their tracks within minutes. Father spent midday repairing tools. He sharpened edge of his axe, polished old iron pot lid, patched hole in sled runner. Children helped by sorting nails into tin cup. Yankas sat wrapped in cloak near hearth, drawing shapes on frost-covered window with fingertip. Mother set larger pot on fire and melted snow into water. She added roots sliced thin and few dried berries. Steam rose slow and steady. She hummed. Soft song taught to her by grandmother, who survived siege during past winter. She sang about long roads, cold feet, and fires shared at hidden camps. Afternoon brought faint sound of cracking branches near woods. Dogs barked from far end of village. Father stepped outside with staff in hand. Tracks led along fence line. A deer broke through brush, ribs showing through fur. It stumbled into open field, legs shaking. Hunger drove it toward village, though danger waited. Villagers watched from windows, unsure whether to chase it away or take chance for meat. Deer paused near boundary tree, then moved toward shed where young man stayed. Father called to others. Several men approached slowly with ropes. They circled. Animal but moved, gentle. Deer panicked and slipped on ice. It had tried to leap but snow dragged legs down. Father approached from side and whispered calm words. Animal slowed for breath. He looked into eyes wide with fear. He lowered rope. He stepped back, letting deer pass. He knew taking life now meant moment of relief, then long regret. Food scarce but hope steadier than fear. Deer stumbled away toward stream and disappeared in trees. Villagers retreated indoors. Father returned home where mother raised eyebrow. He told her deer moved with hunger, not threat. She nodded without judgment. Young man watched scene through shed window. Later, he asked father why he let deer go. Father answered simple. Some things survive same as them. Taking might fill bowl once, but leave silence in fields. Young man held thought long. Evening arrived with pink horizon. Father walked path along, ridged with young men to gather fallen limbs again. They carried lantern to guide steps. Snow crunched loud in still air. Halfway up slope, young man paused and pointed toward shadow between trees. Cloaked figure stood there again, still and quiet. Father gripped staff tighter. Young man stepped forward, but father held his arm. They watched figure approach slow. Cloak tattered around edges. No weapon visible. Figure raised hand, palm up, then placed it on chest. Gesture of greeting or plea. Father called out, asking reason for hiding. Voice behind hood answered faint and rough. Stranger asks if village had room for one more. Father stepped closer. Stranger lowered hood, weathered face, eyes sunken, lips cracked. Looked older than father though, lines deeper from cold rather than age. Stranger said he wandered alone after caravan attacked early winter. He survived by hiding in caves and eating fern roots. He saw smoke from village, but feared driving others away since sickness once followed his group. He kept distance until hunger pressed harder. Father studied him. Stranger's breath shallow. Hands shook. Snow clung to hair and beard. Young man approached and placed blanket over his shoulders. Stranger bowed head. They guided him down ridge toward village, footing tricky on slope. Father used rope tied to belt so stranger could hold in steady steps. When they reached village, mother waited near door with lantern bright. She looked stranger over, then guided him to shed where young man once stayed. She folded blanket into thicker pad for floor. She heated broth while father fetched straw for bedding. Priest arrived soon after to check lungs and pulse. Stranger fever small, exhaustion great. Priest approved rest and broth, but asked stranger to remain in shed until strength returned. Mother fed him slow spoonfuls. He whispered thanks between breaths. Father watched from doorway. Snow fell heavier as night deepened. He closed shed door and secured latch so wind stayed out. Father sat by hearth later, rubbing hands near fire. Mother mended tear in his coat. Children slept early, bodies, tired from hauling water. Young man sat in corner, sharpening small knife used to trim branches. Father told mother stranger might bring stories of his caravan. She listened while rolling thread between fingers. She wondered how many more would arrive before winter's end. Father thought village strong enough to accept some, but feared too many hungry mouths. Balance hard. Night calm until sudden knock at door. Father stood quick and opened slightly. Widow from far end of village stood shaking. She whispered. She saw movement near barn. Father grabbed staff and followed her through snow. They reached barn where moonlight spread across field. Footprints circled fence. Too large for fox. Too narrow for deer. Human again. Father tracked prints along path until they faded into brush. He turned back after distance. Widow hugged herself and thanked him. He escorted her home, then returned to cottage. Inside, fire low. He added fresh wood piece. He sat near doorway, blankets over shoulders, waiting for dawn. Strange visitors, scouts, wanderers, storms. Winter stretched long. He closed eyes only when first pale light touched window. Morning quiet. Snow thick on ground. Children stirred awake under blankets. Mother poured warm water into basin. She felt stranger's forehead and nodded with relief. Fever faded. Young man brought bowl of porridge. Stranger ate slow, hands steadier. Priest visited again. He spoke with stranger, asking details of caravan. Stranger described attack at river bend. Bandits took horses, scattered survivors, burned carts. Some fled south, others north. Stranger walked west alone until mountains blocked path. He circled ridge until finding cave where he slept on cold stone. Villagers gathered later to hear more. They asked if bandits traveled close. Stranger believed they moved far south, chasing easier targets. Relief mild but real. Father listened, quiet. Afternoon clear. Sun broke through clouds, casting long shadows. Children sled down small slope behind chapel, laughter echoing across fields. Young man joined them for a moment, sliding once before cuffing. From cold air. He returned to shed and wrapped blanket. Father repaired fence near woods. He hammered stakes into frozen soil. Mother hung strips of cloth soaked in smoke resin to keep animals from chewing wood. Priest blessed fence posts with sign from old tradition. Evening warm inside cottage. Father sat with children and traced routes on floor with stick, telling stories of roads he walked before settling here. Roads filled with traders, soldiers, pilgrims. Each carried seeds and stories. Children asked if world beyond snow looked different. Father smiled thin. He said roads wait under snow, waiting for spring feet. Night crept slow. Stranger in shed slept sound. Young man whispered stories of his family to mother, voice soft. Father stepped outside one last time. He looked toward ridge. No figure watched tonight. Only tall trees and soft fall of new snow. Village rested, but winter still watched. The storm returned 2 nights later. Snow fell thick enough to erase all edges from the world. Roofs, fences, wood piles, even chapel walls blended into a smooth white plain. Wind shook shutters and rattled loose stones. Inside the cottage, the fire burned low to preserve wood. Children slept close to mother, while father watched flames fade to orange. He rose and added 2 branches. Sparks climbed up chimney. Young man slept near doorway wrapped in heavy blanket. Stranger rested inside shed, curled beside ember pot. Father checked door latch, then stepped outside briefly to clear drift, building against hinges. Cold sliced across his face. He worked fast, then returned inside, shaking snow from shoulders. Morning hid behind storm. Village silent except for soft groans from beams under weight. Father shoveled path from cottage to shed so stranger could breathe air if needed. Snow reached his waist in some places. He leaned on shovel, breath trembling. Young man joined him, face red from cold. Together they widened path. Mother boiled water with bark strips. She shared bowls with children and young man. Father carried extra to shed. Stranger sipped slow, steam rising around his beard. He smiled. Weak but warm. Father stayed only moments before wind pushed snow back through open door. He returned to cottage to rest. Hours passed with no break in storm. Villagers stayed inside. Smoke rose through narrow gaps, signaling life but not strength. Father walked to window often, checking for collapse along roof. He listened to dissident cracks where heavy branches snapped. Young man sharpened tools in silence. Mother prepared rags for wrapping frostbitten hands if anyone knocked seeking help. Afternoon eased slightly. Wind slowed. Snow drifted sideways rather than downward. Father stepped outside again. He walked to chapel to speak with priest. Paths buried. He waded through waist-deep snow, pushing each step like moving through water. He reached chapel door and knocked. Priest opened with lantern in hand. He invited Father Ensai. Cellar held fewer jars now. Priest counted again. Supplies stretched thin. Enough for 2 weeks, if storms paused. If not, hope rested on recovered scouts once healed. Priest asked Father to prepare for journey south when weather cleared. Father agreed, though worry settled. Heavy, he returned home. On way, he noticed prints near old mill path. Fresh, human, smaller steps, uneven. He followed short distance. Prints vanished near pine cluster. Wind erased path. He searched area, staff ready, but heard only distant creak of frozen branches. He returned home once snow thickened again. Later that day, knock sounded on door. 3 villagers entered with news. Widow fell near well while fetching snow. Her leg twisted, unable to stand. Father and mother ran to help. They found her sitting beside snow mound, clutching knee. Father lifted her carefully and carried to cottage. Mother prepared warm stones wrapped in cloth. Young man supported her back while priest arrived with herbal oil. They settled her near hearth. Villagers crowded small room, offering folded blankets. Widow's breath, shaky but steady. Father pressed her hand, assuring she would heal. Priest asked mother to mix clay paste for swelling. She applied paste along knee and wrapped with cloth. Widow thanked them with soft voice. Night fell slow. Snow continued, light but steady. Cottage filled with bodies' warmth and quiet voices. Neighbors helped carry extra blankets to shed for stranger. They checked roof braces again. Father secured. Shutter hinges with rope. As night deepened, wind stopped. Silence heavy. Father stepped outside, lantern held low. World flat white, moon hidden. He listened. No wolves. No branches breaking. Only faint scrape of snow sliding off roof edges. He walked toward boundary tree, lantern casting circle of light around boots. He saw a faint shape on ridge again. Cloaked. Figure returned, this time standing still, not hiding. Father walked closer, staff ready. When close enough to see eyes under hood, figure raised hand but did not speak. Father called out. Figure stepped back, slow. Snow shifted under feet. They stood facing each other across small gap of white. Father asked if figure sought shelter. Silence. Figure lowered hand and turned away. It walked along ridge toward eastern path without glance back. Father watched until cloak vanished behind rock outcrop. He waited few moments, then returned to village, unsettled but calm. Inside cottage, widow slept. Children curled against mother. Young man whispered to father that stranger in shed coughed through night. Father nodded and went outside again too. Deliver warm broth. Stranger drank, eyes grateful. Father sat beside him a few minutes, speaking about clearing snow tomorrow to reach granary easier. Stranger nodded, weak but hopeful. Morning broke with pale light. Storm moved on. Clouds parted. Above mountains. Snow deep but still. Villagers emerged slowly from homes, blinking at brightness. They greeted each other with tired smiles. Father helped widow return to her house, walking slow to avoid strain on leg. Mother gave her leftover berries for nourishment. Father then joined group clearing main path. They shoveled wide lane from chapel to granary. Snow shoved into tall. Banks, travelers' crates still sat stacked inside granary. Mule tracks barely visible from departure. Father cleared roof edges so weight decreased. Priest climbed ladder to inspect beams. Young man worked beside children to clear smaller paths. Between houses. He slipped once and laughed quietly, first sound of levity in days. Children pulled him up and continued shoveling. By midday sun climbed higher, air calmer though still cold. Father gathered dried wood and stacked near cottage. He lifted heavy. Logs to carry inside when he noticed something near fence. Bundle of cloth tied with thin rope. He bent down and picked it up. Inside, small pouch of dried fruit and 2 strips of smoked meat. No footprints nearby. Someone left offering in night. He looked toward ridge. Nobody visible. He carried bundle. Inside. Mother examined contents. She wondered if cloaked figure left gift. Father nodded slow. They placed strips in storage jar, saving for days when broth too thin. Afternoon quiet until priest called meeting. He announced scouts healthy enough to speak. They described path south, blocked by collapsed bridge. Town beyond, unreachable until thaw. Villagers murmured. Priests planned alternate routes, but distance longer and food limited, Father suggested. Small team explored Valley West where old road once led traders before wars. Route abandoned due to landslides, but might hold hidden caches. Priest approved scouting once, weather steadier, night, calm again. Children fell asleep early. Young man sat with father near fire. He whispered story of how his group once shared. Bred with strangers who roamed between villages, trading salt for grain. He said sharing kept them alive during early cold moons. Father listened and thought of bundle left near fence. Mother lay blankets near hearth, an invited stranger from shed to sleep inside for one night to ease cold. Stranger entered with bowed head, hands trembling slightly. Young man helped him settle near warm stones. Father watched them rest. He felt village stronger because each person offered small peace to others. Winter still harsh, supplies thin, but kindness moved like heat through walls. Before sleep, Father walked outside once more. He stood near boundary tree, sky clear, stars bright, snow glittered like fields of glass. He whispered thanks to quiet night, to food shared, to strangers who turned to neighbors. Sunlight softened frost on window glass. Father woke with shoulders stiff from sleeping near hearth. Stranger rested on cart by warm stones. Young man lay curled by door. Children slept stacked like small bundles near mother. He rose, wrapped, coat around shoulders, and stepped outside. Snow glowed pale blue in early light. Air still and sharp. He walked toward ridge again, scanning tree line. No cloaked figure. Tracks erased by new snowfall. Boundary tree stood silent, branches heavy with frost. He brushed snow from trunk and turned back. Smoke rose from rooftops, one by one, as villagers woke and prepared morning fires. Mother stirred water in pot. She added handful of dried bark and root slices saved from yesterday. Stranger sat up and thanked her with hushed voice. Young man stretched sore arms, then stepped outside to sweep path before snow froze solid. Children woke slow, rubbing eyes, cheeks flushed. After breakfast, Father joined group preparing path to Old Mill Road. Snowdrifts reached their hips. They shoveled, stomped, packed, then shoveled again. Work slow but steady. Priest walked along. Path, checking each home for illness. Widow limped slowly with cane father carved for her from fallen branch. She thanked him again for help during storm. Later morning. Father followed small group toward forest to gather fallen branches. They used poles to check depth before stepping into thick drifts. Trees creaked as sun warmed frost from limbs. Snow dropped in heavy chunks around them. They filled sleds with wood, then dragged loads back to village. Mother worked beside neighbors, sewing patches for cloaks. She instructed children to press heated stones into boots before villagers left on long tasks. Young man helped sharpen blades near shed while stranger practiced standing longer without shaking. He leaned on wooden staff father carved for him. Around midday, priest called father aside. He pointed toward Western Valley where older road led. Before landslide years earlier. Path buried under snow and debris. Priest believed route might hold ruins of abandoned trading post. Supplies there, if lucky. He asked father to lead small scouting party at first break-in weather. Father agreed. Afternoon passed quietly. Villagers cleared roofs and built higher. Snowbanks to protect houses from wind. Some spread ashes on slick paths to prevent falls. Children built small snow walls near chapel, pretending to guard stores like grown guards. When light faded, father carried bowl of broth to shed ware. Extra blankets stored. He paused when he heard footsteps. Cloaked figure stood again near boundary tree, closer now. Father lifted staff. Wind silent. Figure held bundle in hands. It walked forward until lantern light revealed frost on cloaked edges. Figure extended bundle. Father approached slow. Inside cloth lay small tin cup filled with fine flour, smoother than village mix. Father looked up. Figure nodded once, turned, and walked away into darkness. Father caught after, but voice swallowed by snow. He returned home and showed Mother the gift. She touched flour with 2 fingers, feeling smooth grains. She stored it. Carefully in sealed jar. Night passed quiet. Stranger slept deeper. Young man coughed less, strength steady. Children dreamed of warm fields. Father sat awake longer, thinking about cloaked figure. He wondered if wanderer lived nearby or watched from hidden shelter. Next sunrise, clear again. Father prepared for West Valley journey. Mother wrapped bundle of dried bark cakes for him. Priest gathered map, though markings faint from age. Young man asked to join. Father nodded, but asked him to stay close. Stranger insisted remain behind to guard village. They left with 3 others, boots wrapped in cloth below leather. Each carried staff, rope, and sacks. Snow deep along western path. They climbed small ridge, wind soft against backs. Trees sparse. Here where rock slides stripped soil years earlier. Sunlit valley beyond, revealing wide plain half buried under snow. They descended careful. Snow crust thin over hidden drops. Father tested ground with staff. They followed line of pine trees that once marked road, roots thick where path widened. They continued until they reached boulder field where stones blocked route, snow-filled. Gaps like frozen sea. Young man spotted wooden beams sticking from drift. They brushed snow aside. Beneath lay collapsed roof of old building. Walls fallen, but entrance partly intact. They dug with hands and shovels until doorway clear. Father crawled inside first, lantern held low. Inside room smelled stale but safe. Broken crates lay scattered. Metal hooks rusted in stone walls. Shelves collapsed. Father searched corners, moving slow to avoid stirring dust that could choke air. Young man followed, careful not to step on weak boards. They found small chest. Under beam, Father pried lid. Inside lay rolls of cloth, hardened from frost, metal cups, and sealed jar of salt. Salt precious during winter. They wrapped items in cloths and passed to others outside. Further in, they found second storage room half crushed by roof. Father crawled under tilted beam. Snow filtered in through cracks. In corner, old sacks sat stacked. He touched one. Fabric. Stiff. He cut small slit. Fine grain spilled. Flour unknown age, but dry. He filled pouch until full, then tied tightly. Young man found iron kettle intact. Others uncovered broken loom pieces. They sorted useful parts. Before leaving, Father paused. He noticed carving on stone beam, symbols worn but clear, record of traders who built shelter during wars. He traced letters with gloved fingers, then bowed head in respect. They packed sleds heavy with fines. Return climb harder with weight. Father led, breaking path. Young man followed behind, keeping sled balanced. Others flanked sides, pushing wear. Slope steep. Sun lowered behind ridge, casting valley in long shadow. Halfway back, wind picked up. Snow blew across open plain. Father urged faster pace. They reached woods as first flakes returned. Branches caught snow, slowing storm. By time they reached boundary tree, sky filled with swirling white. Village lanterns glowed faint through storm. Neighbors rushed to help unload sleds. Priest carefully stored salt in clay jar sealed with wax. Flour added to cellar, marked separate from new supplies. Cloth stacked for repairs, kettle given to widow whose pot cracked weeks earlier. Each piece spread through village like seeds of strength. Mother met father at door, hands warm against his. Children hugged his legs. Young man collapsed onto stool, breath heavy. Father removed boots and sat near hearth, watching steam rise from coat. He felt tired but full of quiet relief. Stranger approached with cup of warm broth. He nodded silent. Thanks. Father drank slow, letting heat move through chest and arms. Night deep again. Snow heavy. But village fire stronger, supplies slightly more, hope thicker. Snow fell gentle in early dawn, not fierce like past storms. Small flakes drifted slow, settling on rooftops in thin layers. Father woke early and stepped outside to breathe cold morning air. His steps sank only ankle deep. A light storm brought relief. He looked toward ridge where sky cleared above treetops. Quiet morning brought rare comfort. Mother stirred pot near hearth. She mixed thin flour from valley with bark powder to form dough slightly softer than usual. Children waited close, eyes watching steam escape pot lid. Young man stacked dried branches by fireplace. Stranger sat near corner, polishing iron kettle gifted to widow. He tested handle and smiled faint when water boiled without spilling. Priest visited soon after sunrise. He carried folded map marked with symbols from valley. He spoke with father about travel west once snow melted, maybe early spring. Father nodded, though thought heavy about leaving family. Priest left after blessing doorstep with handful of ash mixed with melted snow. Midday quiet. Villagers patched roofs, cleaned sled runners, and checked traps near stream where fish sometimes froze under thin ice. Father walked path to ridge again, following prints faint from night before. They led toward small clearing. No cloaked figure today. Only mound of snow shaped like seat near tree. Father brushed top with glove. Under snow, woven grass mat lay partly buried. He carried mat back to village. Showed mother. She studied weave. Not pattern used by villagers. More southern style. Stranger examined and said traders along river used same mats for sleeping during travel. Father stored mat inside, shed, safe from weather. Afternoon, young man asked father to teach him carving. Father handed small knife and block of soft wood. They sat outside near doorway, coats pulled tight. Father guided hand, showing slow cuts. Young man carved small bird with outstretched wings. His hands shook but shape formed steady. Children gathered around watching. Youngest asked for a wooden toy. Father promised to make one soon. He set aside wood piece for later. Later, mother helped. Neighbor with cracked water jar, sealing crack with wax and cloth fiber. Stranger followed father to frozen stream to check for weak spots. They listened for hollow sounds beneath ice. No cracks found today. As evening came, villagers gathered near chapel for small fire while sky turned violet. They shared stories. From valley ruins, widow told memory of traders passing when she was young. Priest recited old poem about caravans crossing mountains. Children leaned close, eyes wide. Father noticed stranger watching group from edge of circle, shoulders tense. He approached and invited him closer. Stranger stepped into light, posture easing slowly. Neighbors nodded to him, offering space on bench. Stranger listened, but spoke little. Night arrived without storm. Father took short watch shift near boundary tree. Young man joined, bundled tight. They sat on log, breathing slow. Snow crunched faint under distant paws. Wolves passed ridge, but kept distance. Father whispered to young men how animals search same as people, looking for warmth and food. Young man nodded. Near end of shift, faint light flickered between trees. Lantern, cloaked figure again. Father stood. Figure remained still. This time closer, face partly visible. Cheeks hollow, eyes tired. Father raised hand in greeting. Figure lowered head, then walked backward into woods, vanishing without turning around. Father returned inside. To rest, he told Mother. She said wanderers might avoid village from shame or fear. Some lost home, some ran from shadows of pasts. She suggested leaving food at ridge instead of waiting for visitor. Father agreed. Morning arrived with thin sunlight. Father packed small bundle of bark cakes, roots, and little flour. Young man accompanied him to ridge. They tied bundle to low branch near clearing. No sign of figure. They walked back without waiting. Later that day, villagers prepared hides to dry, repaired worn straps, and shaped new snowshoes from willow. Children stacked snow into tall piles for fun, then knocked them down. Their laughter echoed across field, sharp against cold air. Priest organized group to check fences near woods. Father joined. They walked long stretch, tightening posts and replacing broken stakes. They found rabbit tracks, but no human prints. Snow drifted smooth across open field. Returning to village, they heard call from North Path. Scouts who once set south approached slowly, leaning on poles. Their bodies thin but stronger than last sight. They carried small bundle wrapped in wool. Priest rushed to meet them. They said they reached small shelter 2 valleys away and found abandoned wagon with sacks inside. One sack contained barley kernels, frozen hard but dry. Villagers helped carry bundle to chapel cellar. Father inspected kernels. Edges cracked, but still usable. He spread them on cloth to dry near low fire. Mother ground small handful into flour that evening for testo. Texture coarse, but edible. Night meal thicker than usual. Children smiled. More. Mother placed extra dollop in youngest bowl. Stranger bowed head longer than rest before eating. Young man sat near fire holding carved bird. He smoothed wings and placed it on shelf above hearth. Later night come. Father walked outside again. Moon bright. Snow glittered. He reached ridge. Bundles still tied to branch, but snow disturbed beneath. Prince led away deeper into woods. Not human boots. Barefoot patterns, but broad like leather thongs, worn thin. Father followed few steps, then turned back. He trusted wanderer collected gift. At home, he watched family sleep. Fire embers faint. He sat near door, wrapped in old coat, thinking about next valley, next storm, next stranger. Winter long, but days inching forward. Wind rose again, sharp and fast, but snow stayed light. It drifted across ground in thin lines like smoke on ice. Father walked along outer path, checking fence posts. Each post leaned slightly from weight of storms. He pressed them deeper into soil, using back of axe handle like mallet. He pulled strips of cloth from pocket and tied them across weak joins. Mother's knots held strong even in frost. Young man followed behind, carrying coils of twine. Stranger walked at slower pace, leaning on staff. He touched bark on posts as though counting each one. When he reached last post, he paused and looked toward thick woods. He said he once walked through long ridge like this, far south where birds vanished in winter and no fire burned for leagues. Father listened without interrupting. Silence followed. Stranger lowered gaze and continued down path. Back in village, priest gathered elders to speak about water supply. Stream froze thick. Holes cut days before sealed overnight. Villagers needed deeper access or risk shortage. Father volunteered to help cut new hole near bend where water flowed faster. They packed saws, chisels, and branches for support. Snow. A long stream reached chest height, so they moved slow. Dotted bend. Father knelt, tapping ice with staff. Hollow sound near center. They cut channels with saws, breaking chunks loose with poles. Water dark beneath, barely moving. They widened hole enough for bucket. Steam rose faint. Elders lowered bucket tied with rope, lifting heavy water with both hands, each trip slow. They filled barrels, sealed tops with rags to keep snow from blowing in. Young man carried smaller bucket to shed and cottage. Stranger helped pour into clay jars. Mother boiled water to keep it clean. Children took turns drying buckets by fire so ice did not form inside. Afternoon. Villagers heard barking near far end of village. Father ran to see. A dog staggered from woods, fur tangled with twigs, ribs sharp. It collapsed near widow's doorstep. Widow knelt and stroked dog's head. Animal shivered, violent. Father wrapped dog in cloak and carried to cottage. Mother warmed broth, thin enough to sip. Dog licked slowly, eyes closing. Children sat close, but silent. Stranger watched with knowing smile, as though memories stirred behind his eyes. While tending dog, Father noticed dried leaves tangled in fur, not local variety. Leaves smooth, long, darker green. Young man inspected and said he saw similar near hidden paths south. Dog might have followed old caravan tracks. Mother picked leaf and placed in small jar for reference. Father rubbed dog's head gently until shivering eased. Snow fell harder near dusk. Wind curled around house corners. Father secured shutters. Before night, priests walked through village with lantern, asking each home to check roofs. After last storm, beams weakened. Father climbed ladder to inspect his roof again. Young man steadied ladder below. Snow piled heavy. Father knocked ice loose, sending chunks sliding to ground. Inside, mother wrapped dog in blanket near hearth. Children fed it small bites of soaked bread. Stranger watched from corner. He whispered about dogs guiding lost travelers through mountain passes. Young man nodded and sat beside him. They spoke in slow words about long roads and silent winters. Night deepened. Father took watch near granary. Snow fell steady but soft. Lantern light reached few feet. He sat on ladder, staff resting across knees. Wind quiet enough to hear creaks of trees beyond fields. Hours passed slow. He stayed alert for cloaked figure, but saw nothing. He heard crunch of snow, soft, cautious. He lifted lantern. Deer stepped from woods, same one from earlier week. Its fur thinner now. It sniffed air toward granary. Father stayed still. deer. Approached closer, stopped, then turned back toward trees. Father watched until shape vanished. He wondered if animals followed same instinct as wanderers, always moving toward heat, then away before fully trusting. Before dawn, father returned home, steps tired. Mother waited with a bowl of thin porridge to warm him. He ate slow, eyes half closed. She placed hand on his forehead, brushing frost from hair. He leaned against her shoulder for a moment, then rested. Beside fire, morning brightened. Villagers assembled near chapel to plan trade routes again. Scouts prepared notes about collapsed bridge and frozen valley. Priests thought of sending small groups east to find new market routes. Father listened, but said focus needed on keeping village fed through storms still ahead. Young man suggested exploring ridge caves where stranger once hid. Caves might hold supplies from older groups or abandoned tools. Father considered idea. He agreed to search when weather eased. Later that day, snow eased and sun appeared faint behind clouds. Father gathered tools and rope. Young man joined. Stranger asked to stay behind to watch dog. Mother packed small bundle of flat cakes and dried berries for them. They left toward ridge. They climbed careful, zigzagging slope to avoid deep pockets. Trees thick near top. Wind stronger. At clearing where bundle ones left, father paused. Snow packed down, sign of recent visit. Tracks led deeper into woods. They followed slow, staff testing ground. Tracks thin, irregular. Cloaked figure walked. Uneven path. Soon they reached rock face partly hidden by branches. Father brushed snow from surface. Small opening appeared, narrow and dark. Young man crouched to look. Air warm relative to outside. Faint smell of burnt wood. They entered, crawling. Past narrow arch. Inside cave widened into chamber. Old fire pit burned long ago. Char lines on stone. Pile of woven mats stacked near wall. Clay pots cracked, scattered. Marks of long stay. Father checked corner and found pouch tied with leather cord. Inside, crushed herbs and few seeds. Seeds pale, light, hard to tell if alive. He pocketed pouch. Young man explored deeper tunnel. He found sleeping alcove lined with grass, but empty now. No new prints. They left cave with respect, not wanting to disturb further. Outside, wind stung cheeks. They walked back path, discussing how many winters wanderers rested here before moving on. Father thought of mat he carried home earlier. Same pattern, same maker-dotted village. Mother greeted them with broth. Children jumped at sight of seeds. Priest examined pouch. He said seeds might grow once thaw came, though soil thin in early spring. Father planned to plant in quiet corner near stream. Afternoon passed with chores. Father split wood and stacked neat rows. Young man helped repair. Sled runner cracked on last journey. Stranger scraped frost from shed roof and checked hinges. Dog woke, stood slow, tail twitching. Children cheered softly. Dusk. Sky glowed orange over snowfields. Villagers gathered near chapel where priest announced short singing to thank safe return. Voices low, tune simple. Words spoke of winter's hold and steady hearts. Father stood beside mother, holding youngest child on hip. Young man stood with stranger near back, heads bowed. After gathering, father walked to boundary tree again. He placed small stone on ground as mark of gratitude. Snow clung to branches above, heavy, but still. He turned to leave when soft rustle sounded behind him. Cloaked figure stood partway down slope, this time closer than ever before. Lantern light glinted off frost near figure's eyes. Father spoke quietly, asking if food helped. Figure nodded, voice faint like cracked ice. The wanderer said he watched village because he once lived nearby but left after harsh season when family died. He feared return. He walked alone seasons long until feet bled. He stayed near ridge because voices from village reminded him of old home. Father listened with open eyes. He stepped closer, but not too close. He told wanderer there was space for rest, not questions. Figure lowered head, whispering thanks, but stepped back. He walked into woods without waiting for more. Father returned home. He sat long at table, thinking. Mother placed a warm bowl in front of him and rubbed his hands until they thawed. He looked at sleeping children, warm fire, thick blankets. He felt heaviness and lightness together. Night fell soft. Snow drifted without wind. Strangers slept easier. Young man slept curled near fire. Dog rested between children. Father closed eyes at last, mind calm. The storm eased for several days. Snow settled into smooth hills around the village. Sun rose low but clear, casting pale beams across open fields. Father opened door early, boots sliding on packed snow. He stepped outside and stretched sore shoulders. Air sharp enough to sting skin, but quieter than weeks prior. Winter's still strong, but no wind carried threat this morning. Children played near chapel, sliding on frozen paths, their feet polished smooth. Mother hung blankets outside to air. Frost formed crust along edges. She beat fabric with branch to loosen. Dust and dried smoke from hearth. Young man helped strangers stand and walk short distance. Strangers still weak but stronger each day. Dog followed close, tail moving, slow but steady. Father walked toward stream where villagers cut new waterhole. Ice thick again. He knelt and tapped edge. Solid. He took chisel and carved small opening to widen hole. Water beneath moved sluggish. He filled buckets, pulling rope slowly to avoid spills. He rested buckets near sled dot. Priest approached carrying rolled parchment. He opened map and traced lines showing new routes found from valley ruins. He pointed toward ridge path where cave held mats and seeds. He suggested planting early in shallow soil once melt began. Father nodded, though spring felt far away. Afternoon brought clear skies. Villagers shoveled snow from roofs to prepare for next storm. Father climbed a narrow ladder to his roof again. Young man steadied base, while stranger gathered fallen branches to burn. Children formed chain, passing smaller branches to older neighbors. Later, father joined group, reinforcing fence. Near woods. They hammered stakes deeper and tied twine across weak posts. Neighbor whispered about hearing howls closer last night. Father listened, then suggested lighting small fires at intervals along fence to deter animals. They placed torches in snow-filled holders and lit them when sky dimmed. Mother prepared stew thicker than usual, mixing leftover barley kernels from scouts fine with roots. Steam-filled cottage. Dog wagged tail weakly and licked bowl clean. Stranger laughed, quiet for first time, surprised by appetite returning. Evening soft. Father stepped outside with lantern. Snow reflected warm glow. He walked toward ridge but stopped halfway. No cloaked figure, only marks of birds hopping near brush. He left small pouch of bark cakes again, tied low to tree. He returned home without waiting. Night deepened. Fire burned slow. Father fell asleep near hearth, head resting on rolled blanket. He dreamed of fields without snow, grain stalks bending in calm wind, children collecting seeds in open baskets. But winter still present when he woke. He rose and stoked embers. With stick, before sunrise, faint knock at door. Father opened quietly. Priest stood with lantern, his expression tense. He said wolves attacked neighbors' shed near far end of village. Livestock killed. Father grabbed coat and followed. Snow crunched beneath boots. Sky grey, hint of dawn. They reached shed. Blood dark on snow, already crusted. Tracks scattered around pen. Wolves desperate. Fence broken. Villagers gathered in silence, heads low. They dragged carcass aside, planned to salvage hide and bones. Priest said guards needed through night in shifts. Father agreed to take second shift. Children woke late, unaware at first. Mother explained. Gently, eyes soft. She asked Father to carry warm broth to widow who owned livestock. Father walked to her house, knocked, and offered bowl. Widow held cup with trembling hands, tears silent. Father placed coat over her shoulders and sat with her until breath steadied. Later morning, villagers patched shed walls. Father hammered planks tight. Young man tied rope across gate. Stranger brought stones to seal lower gaps. Children collected. Stray feathers from snow. Afternoon, snow returned light but steady. Father trained young man to track animal prints in shallow snow. They followed line of tracks near woods but stopped once trees thickened. Father explained wolves hungry now because deep snow buried prey. Young man lowered head in understanding. That evening, mother prepared bread using small portion of fine flour left by wanderer. She baked thin flat pieces on iron plate, sent rich enough to fill entire room. Family shared small pieces. Stranger chewed, slow, savoring taste. Children smiled, sleepy. Night arrived early. Father walked fence line carrying lantern. Second shift. Quiet. Snow drifted against posts. Torches burned low. He tightened rope on one post while listening to distant howls. Wolves far but restless. He stayed until torch burned low, then returned home. Before entering, he looked toward ridge. No figure. Morning calm again. Priests gathered group for travel plan. They decided to search deeper into Western Valley next week, if weather held. Father prepared gear, rope, flint, spare cloth, carved. Sticks for marking paths. Young man sharpened knives. Stranger packed herbs and water flasks. Mother dried bark and berries for journey. Later, Father visited cave again alone. He left small portion of grain near entrance. He stood silent, breathing slow. Cave dark but still. He imagined wanderer returning at night, sitting near old fire. Pit, warming hands against stone. On return, he found children clearing small hill for sled path. Snow piled high. Younger slid down shouting. Dog barked, weak but happy. Stranger watched from distance, leaning on staff. Smile traces lingered. On face. Afternoon, Wind shifted from east. Clouds darker. Storm forming over mountains. Father hurried to gather wood. Young man tied roof beams again. Mother moved blankets inside. Priest rang bell once to warn families to seal doors early. Snow fell thick before dusk. Wind whipped flakes into spirals. Father stayed near hearth, sharpening axe. Mother prepared broth for long night. Children huddled close. Strangers sat wrapped in 2 blankets. Young man stared at fire flames flickering against window. Storm grew. Louder, roof groaned. Father stepped outside briefly to check door latch. Snow struck face like shards. He leaned into wind and returned inside. He barred door with heavy oak beam. He sat with family until storm eased after midnight. Silence returned. Father opened door slightly. Snow piled waist high. He checked ridge. No sign of wanderer. He placed lantern on snow near boundary tree in case someone passed in storm. Light. Small but steady. Before sleep, Father thanked Mother for strength. She pressed her forehead to his. Children slept safe around them. Stranger breathed steady. Young man stretched sore arms and fell asleep against wall. Village rested though storm. Waited beyond clouds. The storm settled by dawn. Snow piled high against doors and windows, soft as wool but heavy enough to bend beams. Father pushed door open with shoulder and carved narrow passage through drift. Cold air rushed in. Sun hid behind thick clouds. But light still filtered through snow like pale milk. He stepped outside. Fields looked flat and endless. Only roof peaks and chimney smoke marked where homes stood. He followed pack path from last night's patrol and reached fence line. Torches from previous watch lay buried. He shook snow from one and stuck it upright again. Mother cleared frost from inside windows with cloths dipped in warm water. Children rolled blankets and stacked near hearth. Young man chopped smaller branches into kindling. Stranger filled jars with melted snow from pot. Dogs slept near corner, tail curled around paws. Priest called villagers to chapel courtyard once paths cleared. Voices quiet, steps slow. Many shivered under thin coats. Priest spoke about wolves drawing closer after last kill. He asked volunteers for nightly watch rotations. Father raised hand first. Several others joined. Priest then pointed to Western Valley on map. He believed storm cleared loose snow on slopes, making passage safer if they moved soon. Father agreed. To leave next morning with young man and one other. Stranger wanted to join, but priest asked him to stay another day to regain strength. After gathering, villagers returned to homes. Father spent morning fitting rope to sled, tightening knots, and testing weight. Young man checked iron hooks for cracks. Mother packed dried bark cakes, root slices, and small strip of smoked meat left from gift bundle. Children folded cloths to wrap around Father's feet inside boots. Before dusk, Father visited widow's shed. Wolves returned earlier, but did not breach new barrier. Father hammered metal patches on gate and packed snow around base to seal gap. Widow thanked him with piece of cloth embroidered with old pattern. He tucked it in coat. Evening quiet at cottage. Mother baked small round using fine flour mixed with grain from valley. She placed loaf near fire to cool slightly. Family sat around and shared in silence. Each bite offered warmth and memory of days before hunger. Later that night, Father walked to Boundary Tree again. He carried lantern and left small portion of bread on flat stone. Snow fell lightly. No sign of wanderer. He stood few minutes, then returned home. Step slow, breath steady. Before sleep, father sharpened axe, then lay near hearth. Young man slept leaning against wall. Stranger whispered prayer in language foreign to most ears. Children breathed soft. And even mother draped shawl over father before curling beside him. Morning came cold. Father rose early, packed sled-strap boots, and wrapped feet with cloth embroidered by widow. Young man joined outside along with third traveller, a quiet man from eastern huts. Priest blessed rope and handed small flask of oil to father. He nodded and pulled hood tight. They left village at first light. Snow crisp under boots. Wind gentle. At start, they followed ridgeline west, using carved sticks to mark path. Trees thinned as they climbed toward valley. Father led, young man behind, quiet man last dragging, sled dot, shadows long across slopes, though sun still low. Rocks jutted from snow where wind blew top layers away. They crossed open field where crusts cracked under weight. Father tested each step. Once, quiet man slipped knee-deep into hollow pocket. Young man helped pull him out, snow clinging to clothes. They continued until midday, reaching edge of valley where cliffs rose sharp on both sides. Wind pushed snow across gap, forming smooth drifts, hiding drop-offs. Father tapped ground and chose path near ridge where roots from old pines gave foothold. They descended slope in zigzag pattern. Sled dragged slow. Snow deep but stable. At base, they reached frozen marsh. Father pointed to old posts sticking from snow, remnants of road once laid across wet ground. Young man walked ahead to test ice. Strong enough to cross but needed care. Halfway across marsh, wind began to rise. Snow swirled in fast spirals. Quiet man pointed to ridge where dark shapes moved. Wolves watched from distance, pacing along. Upper slope. Father gripped staff tighter. He urged Groot to move faster. Wolves did not descend, only tracked movement. They reached far side of marsh and climbed low ridge. Valley floor widened into flat plain. Old camp markers lay scattered. Broken wheel, rusted pan, tattered cloth. They approached collapsed shelter. Half buried. Father brushed snow aside. Metal chest underneath, lid warped but intact. They dragged chest onto sled and pried open. Inside, dried beans, hard but whole. Enough to feed several families for days if softened. Young man stared wide-eyed. Quiet man whispered thanks under breath. They searched further and found second crate under snow mound. This one held tools. Chisels, saw blades, 2 sewing needles. Father tucked them in cloth pouch. Young man gathered wood shards that could be carved into pegs or handles. Sudden gust of wind shook branches. Snow slid from cliff face in heavy sheet. Father shouted for cover. They crouched behind rock while powder poured past like white waterfall. No collapse followed. They rose again, brushing snow from coats unlowered. They prepared to return. Path harder uphill with heavy sled. Father walked front, shoulders straining. Young man pushed from behind. Quiet man steadied sled through narrow turns. Wolves watched from distance again but did not approach. As they neared marsh, snow thickened. Ice groaned beneath. Father moved. Slower, choosing path near thicker snow where ice reinforced. They crossed without break. Wind eased near ridge. Sled groaned under weight of chest but held. Dusk reached horizon when they reached boundary tree. Village lights faint dots across field. Children spotted return and ran to meet them, though careful not to stray far. Priest and mother arrived, lifting lids to inspect beans. Villagers gathered, sighing relief. They carried supplies to chapel cellar. Beans spread on cloth to dry further. Tools stored in wooden chest near altar. Seeds from cave placed in pouch beside chest. Father returned. Home tired. Mother pressed warm cloth to his hands. Young man sat beside fire, grateful but silent. Quiet man headed home to rest. Later night come. Snow fell again, but soft. Stranger sat near door and thanked father with eyes, no words. Dog lay at father's feet before sleep. Father walked outside once more. He checked bread left earlier. Gone. Light prints led toward woods. Cloaked figure lightly returned. He turned back to cottage, mind calm despite winter's grip. Morning sunlight hovered behind thick clouds, turning the snow a soft grey. Father slept longer than usual, body heavy from the long journey. When he woke, he stretched sore muscles and pulled on coat stiff from dried frost. Mother already tended. Fire, stirring water in part with slow, steady movements. Children sat near her feet, rubbing warm stones between hands. Young man sharpened knife on flat stone, while stranger finished sewing tear in wool cloak. Priest visited shortly after, carrying parchment marked with updated supply counts. Beans from valley stored safely, enough for several meals, but not enough to ease full hunger. He asked father to organize groups for grinding, boiling, portioning. Father agreed, though he preferred rest. Mother placed a hand on his arm and asked him to pace himself. He nodded. Villagers gathered in small groups. Some pounded beans in wooden bowls to soften before boiling. Others cut bark into thin strips for stretching stew. Children fetched snow for melting. Widow sat near doorway with dog curled beside, her hands trembling less than week before. Father worked through morning, sliding wooden ladle through pot of boiling bean mash. He passed bowl to neighbor with sick child, then filled another for traveler still recovering. Steam warmed his face, easing chill from bones. By afternoon, sky darkened again. Wind moved across field like slow breath. Father noticed tracks near ridge. Fresh, light, turning toward north path rather than village. He followed short distance, young man by his side. Tracks shallow and careful, same shape seen many times. The cloaked wanderer. Father stopped at boundary tree. Beyond, footprints faded into thicker drifts. He left fresh root slice on flat stone, then turned back toward village. Young man asked why he continued helping someone who never spoke full truth. Father answered simple. Some hearts return slower than bodies. Young man absorbed words without reply. Back home, stranger sat outside polishing iron kettle. He glanced toward ridge, sensing movement though nothing visible. Mother stood by doorway, wind tugging shawl. She invited stranger inside for warmth, but he insisted staying near air to breathe easier. Father joined him on bench, both silent, sharing. Stillness. Evening near. Villagers gathered in chapel courtyard. Priest spoke of final storm predicted soon. He warned livestock needed shelter closest to homes. Families formed lines, hauling wood planks to build new pens near main road. Father worked hammer. Young man stabilized beams. Stranger tied ropes. Children carried handfuls of straw to fill gaps. By sunset, new pens stood solid. Snow drifted around them, but frames held strong. Father looked across open field, light fading, silence growing. He remembered earlier nights when wolves came close. He prayed fences held through final weeks of cold. Night fell. Mother prepared thick stew using bean mash, root slices, small pinch of salt, each bowl heavy and warm. Father ate slow, savoring. Weight of food. Children fell asleep early, bellies full enough to rest without stirring. Stranger paced near window before settling beside fire. Young man carved new figurine from wood, shaping narrow tree. Father sat with back against wall. Coat off, hands wrapped in cloth to ease aches. He watched flames bend low, smoke rising slow. Wind howled again near midnight. Father rose and checked door. Snow pressed heavy against frame. He pushed wood beam tighter across latch. He listened for howls, but heard only swirling air. He returned to bed, but did not sleep fully, drifting in and out to sounds outside. Before dawn, knocking came at door. Soft, hesitant. Father opened slightly. Cloaked wanderer stood outside. Snow caked along edges of hood. Eyes tired but clear. Father stepped aside, though wanderer shook head. He handed small bundle tied with leather. Father opened bundle, dried. Ibes crushed bark, thin strip of smoked meat. Wanderer nodded once, then stepped back. Father asked if he would stay. Wanderer lowered gaze, saying storm would trap him if he stayed too long. He walked toward woods without waiting for further words. Father stood watching until shape disappeared among trees. Snow covered tracks within minutes. Back inside, Mother examined herbs. She recognized few leaves not found in valley. She ground them into powder and placed in small jar labeled with thread. She brewed tiny pinch into tea to ease coughs. Children sipped small amounts before breakfast. Morning cold but wind eased. Sky lighter. Father shoveled path to chapel where priests counted supplies again. Stranger joined, lifting heavier sacks now that strength returned. Young man carried clay jugs from stream. By midday, clouds thickened. Snow returned in silent sheets. Father walked fence line again. He tied extra rope along weak post near woods. He listened. No howls. Only wind pressing through branches. He paused near boundary tree. He placed hand on bark, feeling rough surface beneath frost. He whispered quiet thanks to road that brought strangers, though each left again. He returned home and sat near fire. Mother braided cloth into thick cord for tying bundles. Children played with carved bird and carved tree. Stranger mended harness. Strap using needle from valley ruin. Young man stirred part, adding snow to stretch stew further. Evening dim and slow. Snow thick outside. Father checked door again. This storm stronger but quieter than last. He sensed final stretch of winter, though weeks remained. He sat by hearth with children leaning on his legs. He closed eyes as flames crackled. Night lasted. Long. Families slept with warm stones under blankets. Stranger kept small lantern near cot. Father woke several times, listening for wolves, but heard none. Storm-covered scent trails and muffled sound. Before sunrise, faint light crept across room. Father rose and stretched. He peeked outside. Snow deep again, half burying fence posts. He stepped into quiet air, boots sinking deep. Cold, sharp, but clean. Sky held stillness that followed harder storms. He walked toward ridge again. No tracks, no wandering shape, only smooth snow and distant trees. He stood long, letting silence rest on shoulders. He returned home when wind shifted, carrying hint of thaw, though winter far from finished. He sat at table, wrapped hands around warm cup of water. Mother sat beside him, resting head on his shoulder. Children still sleeping, breath steady. Stranger sleeping near fire, body relaxed. Young man curled near doordat. Father closed eyes and breathed slow. He thought of long roads under sun, far from snow. But now he stayed, warmth holding him. Sun rose weak behind a veil of thin clouds. Snow glowed pale silver across the hills. Father stepped outside with shovel in hand. Breath formed soft white clouds that drifted upward and vanished. No wind for once. Snow settled in smooth waves across valley, unbroken except for fox tracks leading toward frozen stream. Inside cottage, Mother boiled water with herbs from the wanderer's last bundle. The scent, faint but warm. Children moved slow, wrapped in blankets while young man mended rope knots for sled. Stranger stood near window, watching outside, hands folded. The dogs stretched, shook off sleep, then curled again near fire. Father finished clearing path and leaned shovel against wall. He walked to chapel where priest stood counting jars again, candle flickering beside him, supplies low but steady enough. For a short time. Priest spoke softly about waiting for Thar to begin planting. Father said Thar would come later than last year. Priest nodded, though hope flickered behind lines of worry. Villagers gathered to repair storage cellar entrance. Storms pushed snow into cracks where moisture might seep in. Father pushed stones tight while young man packed straw between gaps. Stranger carried loads of earth to seal top layer. Children watched from steps, cheeks red from cold. By midday sun brightened. Thin rays glinted across ice. Fathers, mothers, elders stepped outside with cautious smiles, sensing slight shift in air. Winter still firm, but edge softened. Birds chirped faint from woods, first sound in many days. Father stopped working and listened long. Mother walked too well with bucket. Father joined her. Ice still thick, but softer near center. He chipped rim while she held rope. They filled bucket and carried home together. Children stood waiting with cups. After meal, young man asked father to teach him how to grind grain without wasting powder. They sat at low table, stone bowl between them. Father pressed grain with slow circles, even pressure. Young man repeated motion, hands steadier than first attempts months earlier. Father nodded approval. Stranger watched them, smile faint. He traced lines along wooden beam, thinking of long roads. He knelt, asked if he might help hunt small game once snow softened. Father agreed, but warned wolves linger near valley edges. Stranger nodded, eyes calm. Later afternoon, sound echoed from hill. Children climbed mound near chapel and shouted that they saw shapes far north. Father grabbed staff and walked to boundary tree. He narrowed eyes through glare. Two travelers approached, wrapped in furs, dragging sled heavy with sacks. Father walked forward with priest and young man following. As travelers neared, villagers recognized them, scouts from northern outpost. They carried sacks containing roots hardened from frost but edible. They had reached neighboring village weeks earlier and carried trade goods south. They shared stories of storms worse than here, lost bridges, frozen caravans, but small communities survived by fishing through ice. Villagers gathered, helping unload sacks, roots stored in cellar beside beans, travelers given broth and blankets. They sat near fire in chapel, telling quiet tales until exhaustion pulled them to sleep. Father returned home, head heavy from day of work. Mother placed stew in bowl and rested hand on his wrist. Children leaned against him. Young man placed carved bird in his palm, wings smooth and rounded. Stranger sat by door, sharpening blade and smiling with practiced patience. Outside darkness deepened. Snow fell soft like ash falling from high chimney. Father stepped outside once more. He walked slow toward ridge. Lantern light cast narrow circle around him. He stood under boundary tree, far beyond tree line. Faint shape moved along slope. Cloaked wanderer again, smaller now against distance. He paused, looking toward Villazarg one last time, then turned and walked deeper into forest. Father did not call out. He watched until shape vanished. He returned home to warm air, wooden walls, small breaths of sleeping children. He took seat by fire and allowed shoulders to rest. Wind quiet, night long but calm. Final snow came before dawn. Not loud or violent. Silent blanket covering village in one smooth layer. When morning arrived, sky clear. Sun shone bright, reflecting light so strong villagers shielded eyes. Father stepped outside. Snow crust sparkled under boots. Air cold but carried hint of melt. Drips formed along roof edges. Tiny cracks appeared in ice on stream. Children ran out laughing, voices echoing across Whitefield. Mother watched them. From doorway, arms folded, shawl slipping from shoulders. Young man walked toward woods carrying staff, dog trotting beside him. Stranger knelt near freshly packed cellar wall, pressing snow tight, preparing for next season. Father walked to ridge one final time. Snow untouched now. No tracks from wanderer, branch where he left food empty. Sun warmed small patches of exposed bark. Father placed hand on tree trunk, head bowed. He looked back at village. Smoke from chimneys, roofs patched with care. Fences standing stronger than early winter nights. People moved with purpose, not fear. Winter not gone, but its sharpest teeth dulled. He walked home slow. When he entered cottage, Mother handed him cup of warm tea. He held it between palms, warmth spreading steady through his fingers. Children crawled onto his lap, sighing. Fire burned bright, stones warmed floor, and silence settled gentle. He breathed deep and closed eyes. Thank you for staying with this winter story. You'll rest now with a village that endured long nights, storms, hunger, and strangers who carried pieces of hope. Another tale waits beyond the ridge when spring moves through old snow and roads open again. Soon I will bring you a new quiet journey from another forgotten winter, before you fall asleep. Know there is a small gift waiting next time, a warm tale from a coastal village who traded salt for survival. Sleep well.